We're about 1% of the American population, and a lot of communities have the same sorts of issues and challenges and aspirations as everybody else does. I'm the Assistant Director of the Longhouse Education and Cultural Center, and what we do is we support Native arts and cultures, or Indigenous arts and cultures if you want to be more broadly inclusive of all the people of the Pacific Rim. We are in Olympia, Washington, Salish country. Evergreen is built on Medicine Creek Treaty lands. Washington State has 29 federally recognized tribes, and 23 of them are in western Washington. Nisqually, Skokomish, Squaxin Island tribe, Chehalis. We're the first longhouse built on a U.S. college campus, and we opened in 1995. This is a plank house, or longhouse is the more popular term these days, but this kind of structure would have been common from as far north as Yakutat, Alaska, and as far south as the northern part of California.
And what were these buildings used for?
Homes. My tribe is from Alaska, southeast Alaska. My mom's from Klawock, Alaska.
How did she come down here from Alaska?
It was a really popular thing to do at that time frame. There was a real push by the Eisenhower administration to relocate rural Native people from their rural villages into more urban settings, and so that's why you see huge Native populations in places like San Francisco, LA, Seattle.
You do?
Yeah, because it was also a time period of abrogating treaty rights and recognition of federal recognition of tribes, and so the Eisenhower administration swept through a ton of tribes, including some in Minnesota, to separate the federal obligation from the tribes, and so some tribes have worked really hard to regain federal recognition and so forth, but I think the relocation efforts was part of that.
Was it, how does history look back on that now?
From the perspective of the people that participated in it, I don't know that people are really all that. In some instances, people are very vocal about it, especially their children and grandchildren who are aware of what happened and what the real underlying motive was. But I think for people who did it, it's just, part of their life. People don't.
So their descendants have spoken critically of it. Do you?
Yeah.
So what do you think the purpose of it was? Just we need labor for the cities or something?
Assimilation. To get people to assimilate and not be Native, not identify with their tribe, but just absorb themselves into the mainstream population. I think they thought they were treating indigenous people as immigrant groups, which...
Right, that's ironic.
Yes, and so they were trying to apply the same kinds of things that helped immigrant groups assimilate into American culture. My dad is Dutch, as you can tell from my blonde hair. I'm half Dutch.
Did your dad's parents wonder, did they even know who Native Americans were?
No, their biggest concern was that my mom wasn't Dutch.
Yeah.
That was they didn't even really know what to do with,
So you can almost say you were born to be like walking that fine line between assimilation and identity as a Native person.
But it's really interesting too, the way Americans have this notion of Native identity that the real Native people stopped existing in 1890. And so it's been hard. Every Native person alive today is an American, and has been influenced by all of the same sorts of things that every other American has. We watch Netflix.
When there is something in the news about, say, a tribe in Florida or something far away, but nonetheless Native, does it pique your interest?
Oh, it definitely. Absolutely. You're always interested to see, because anything that happens, especially on the legal end of things, if there's some kind of precedent set for a different tribe, doesn't matter where it is, then it starts getting, it snowballs and affects every other tribe. One of the things that, if you're involved in Indian country at all, is you realize how small it is. We're about 1% of the American population, and a lot of communities have the same sorts of issues and challenges and aspirations as everybody else does.
Do you live on a reservation?
No, I live in Lacey. I know lots of people who do, and they live the same kind of life that I do. They operate under a different legal structure, and they have different kinds of levels of resource, fewer resources really. But as far as how they live day to day, it's not any different.
Do you think some of the reservations, because they're their own isolated pockets or little islands, in the U.S., does that sort of isolate these populations in a negative way?
No,
okay.
I don't think so. I think you're always stronger for having people around you that are family or extended family or cultural family in some way. Reservation lands are home. It is what they negotiated in their various treaties, and so whether it was voluntary or not.
I'm interested to know how you retain your identity, your traditions, and yet live in a world that is coming out with the new electric car, and is the America is going 1,000 miles an hour, and to hold on to one's traditions is not. That's not to say one way is worse than the other. That's just to say I would assume it to be difficult to blend those two at times. But are you able to do?
Oh yeah, everybody is. Everybody. You have to be able to do that. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is that when you get to participate with other Native people in an event or something that's very meaningful, that's a very restorative kind of experience. It's sort of like, though, when you travel to a foreign country and then you come back into the United States, it feels very odd to find yourself back into the mainstream thing. You're driving down the road and running into traffic.
Right. But as someone who you seem to have a good job, a good life, do you feel like you're in a position where you could be a leader or a model, a role model, or that you would have some wisdom to share?
Well, mostly my circle is with the communities that we serve with our supporting Native arts and cultures, and I think that what we've seen is really how resilient and solid and wonderful people are, all on their own. And so we have been continually impressed with, despite the history, despite everything that goes on, that people retain culture, retain language, and then you have these amazing young people who are literally the seventh generation, who are reasserting their own power. So if anything, I look up to them.
Hi, I'm Brandon Fertig of The Periphery. I'm glad you're enjoying my interview with Ms. Laura Grabhorn. Fun fact, I simply visited her campus while traveling the area to check out the vibe at this well-known school. And yeah, see if I could interview some folks. Well, after getting a terrific interview with a student, I was walking back to my car. Only, I couldn't remember where the lot was on this woodsy campus. So I asked the woman near me on the sidewalk. That woman? Ms. Laura Grabhorn. If so moved, please like and even comment below. Subscribe to this channel to stay up to date on all my latest videos. And to help support, or simply to learn more about some big travel projects I have planned, go to my Patreon page here. Or find the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of my enlightening conversation with Ms. Grabhorn.
I think that the Department of the Interior is with a mind towards resource extraction. And so I think that any kind of economic help that comes out for tribes is going to be focused on resource extraction.
There'll be some underlying motive. There'll be some
Absolutely.
ulterior motive.
Right.
So are you pessimistic? Are you worried about
Yeah.
because of the president?
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah, and the people who are using the president to push through their agenda, which might not necessarily be his agenda, but are seeing their opportunity to move forward on things that they weren't able to.
If your favorite candidate would have won, would then have you welcomed? Would you have then welcomed federal intervention into the lives, into the reservations, Native
No.
Americans?
No, because I think most Americans don't understand very much about what's going on. I think you would have had a more of a recognition of sovereignty and economic self-determination, which is a concept that's not unfamiliar to either party. You know, you've got people that supported that in both parties, and so I think that would have been something. First, there would have been awareness, you know, that people even understood that Native people exist, and it's not simply to compete with casinos that what's his face may have run, but also too, I think there would have been more attention to self-determination.
You would prefer to see the solutions, improvement come from within the reservations, within the
Definitely.
communities, than imposed or,
Right.
I don't know.
It never works when it's imposed from the outside. And then what people often forget is that even though the nations are sovereign, a lot of the services and the resources that are provided are part of those treaties and part of those agreements. And so the feds are living up to their agreements with tribes, or trying to. But I think as far as the decision making about what's best, there are 569 tribes in the United States.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And everybody is different, even within this region. If you just take the issue of familiarity with Native people, I think the region could do better in recognizing and understanding what it means. You know, like, people don't know treaties, they don't understand treaties, they think treaties gave tribes particular rights. They don't understand that it's about retaining rights that people had always had. And they don't understand their connection to it either. Like, the reason why I can live in Lacey is because people gave up that land. You know, I'm a visitor here just as much as anybody else, you know. I'm not a Salish person, so I'm living on land that did belong to Salish people. And so in that role, you benefit from the treaty. And so when tribes retain their fishing rights to harvest half the salmon and half the shellfish on beaches, private or public, people have to remember that the reason why they can do that is because those were rights that they retained.
So sometimes people grumble
A lot of times people grumble.
about the rights.
Yeah. The fishing wars are alive and well in Washington. Yeah, you don't have to, you just have to, it's something that you could tap. It's just right below the surface. Right below.
Okay. So I could find some fishermen in Seattle and ask them
You
about
sure
it,
could.
and they would be sore about the rules being different.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. But do you think relations between Native peoples and the rest of the U.S. is improving?
I think if a Native person and a Native community behaves in an expected way, then people are all for it. They love the nostalgic version. Contemporary, real, live Native people, not so much. I think when you're in communities where you have awareness of and significant interaction with Native people, there's a lot of push back.
What's the pushback about?
Treaties, you know, and the availability. A lot of tribes now, Washington State so great in terms of economic self-determination with not only gaming, but then you take a tribe like Tulalip, which is up in Marysville. They have a whole shopping center. You know, they've expanded beyond gaming, and so they have, they have a whole economic engine that supports their tribe, and a tribe is like a small city. You know,
Right.
you've got all the same kind of things that you're trying to fund. And Muckleshoot, they support their students from kindergarten through their doctoral programs with the money that they earn, and so
Wow.
they do wonderful things for their community members.
And would you argue that's because those reservations, those tribal leaders, pushed back and had good treaties written, or good contracts, or however it's worded?
Or good lawyers
Yeah.
to interpret what the treaties said.
Does this tie into the pushback that you were talking about that some people don't like?
Yeah, because I think that the usual argument, I'm sure you've heard it, is why can't people just be Americans? Why do they have to be Native Americans or whatever?
Yeah.
And a lot of Native people will say, why do we have to be Americans? We're older than Americans. So we precede that.
What can Americans, mainstream America, learn from Native community? You were mentioning the two wolves on the door, and so that got me thinking about, like, the wisdom, the legends.
Yep.
But there could be 100 other ways. So how would you answer that question?
Well, I think that the difference is that we look at elders and older people in our community very differently, and want to learn as much as we can from them while they are here. And so I think what Americans can learn is that culture and life is a lot older than you are, and that there's value in knowing your story. And that's your story, whether you're Jewish or whether you're Dutch or whether you're Scandinavian. You know, there's value in knowing what your story is. What's the story of your ancestors, and what can that bring for you? There's personal meaning. There's a reason why you know the things you do. There's a reason why you do things the way you do. It's not shaped by TV. It's not shaped by your schooling. It's shaped by how your family generations ago dealt with things and the decisions they made. You're one part of that continuum. I think that's what people can learn.
Because that's something that your community or the Native communities tend to practice a lot more than the non-Native communities of the U.S. Are there any specific cultural elements within Native American communities that you think would benefit non-Native Americans?
Respect for land, respect for different kinds of living beings. You know, there's nothing wrong with hunting and fishing, obviously, but there isn't an order where humans are above everything else. You know, it's everybody's part of the same environment, and so to learn how to interact with that and not as something to defeat or conquer.
How do you feel about the pace of American life, mainstream America life? Do you think there's something that non-Native Americans could learn from traditional Native American life?
I think it's really hard for people to just enjoy what they're doing now. You're always thinking about the next place I have to go, the next thing I have to say, or the next thing in my life. And there's a value on being busy and overwhelmed. And I think that there should be a lot more emphasis on just being in a place, whatever that place is, that's quiet.
Let's end this by you telling me the story of the two wolves.
Okay. So these were etched in glass by our friend John Goodwin, who's Makah and Lower Elwha Squam. And his aunt and uncle, John and Edie Hottaway, were two pillars of the longhouse, and so they helped us with how we would run the longhouse. what would the meaning of having a longhouse at a college campus meeting, and so they were so important to that, and just the sweetest, most lovely people. And so his intention was that when people came into the longhouse, they would be enveloped by the protective spirit of his aunt and uncle, represented by the wolves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this isn't something that goes back like the tale of the two wolves as told by our forefathers.
No.
This is a recent like manifestation of what Native American spiritual beliefs and spirits and living on the animals and that kind of thing.
Living culture. If culture weren't living and changing and adapting, it would die. And so every Native person that's here today is here because culture adapts. And so instead of tradition, you might want to say customary, which is something that Maori people do. And so it's a way of looking at how your everything you do is influenced, but it doesn't mean that you're rigidly stuck in time.
Right. That's well put. Thank you.
I thank Bob Yankee from Massey University in New Zealand for coming up with that phrase.
Okay.